So here we are practicing history. I'm the archivist at NRAO, and so you have to start with archives before you can write your history books. A little bit about the NRAO Archives. We began in 2003 when I partially retired after 28 years in the NRAO library. The archives are at the headquarters in Charlottesville. We have NRAO's institutional records. We have papers of scientists, some of whom are NRAO staff, Dave Heeshen, John Finley, Dave Hogg, and many of whom are not NRAO staff, John Krause, Ron Bracewell, and so on. We've become the de facto archives for U.S. radio astronomy, and we're the primary repository for Grote Reber's papers. He sent to us 98 packing crates of material in 1995. It was papers, books, journals, equipment, and stuff, an amazing amount of stuff. Everything from boomerangs to all sorts of stuff. A lot of it did remain in Tasmania after he died. Some of it came to us. The rest of it is still there, probably will never leave Tasmania, and so it's not going to be accessible. How did we start the archives? First, we had to write a policy to decide what we're going to collect and what we're not going to collect. I thought, oh, well, I'll just ask other institutions what they do. Well, nobody had a policy. There was no help whatsoever from any of my colleagues, any other institutions. So I wrote a policy. I urge everybody, if you're going to start archives and want an archival policy, don't reinvent the wheel. Ours is on the webpage. Take ours and modify it. What records do we have? Where are they? We had to decide that at the point that we were going to do this. We had been in existence almost 50 years. We had offices and telescopes in 4 states. There was material in official files. There was material other places. Is it an NRAO? Is it in somebody's garden shed, somebody's garage, a desk drawer? Who knows where it is? Some of the pre-2003 director's office materials we had, well, it was up in the attic. The attic was unheated, uncooled. There were lots of lizards up there, but the roof didn't leak. We had to decide where we were going to put the material. We had a building addition on our building in Charlottesville that was begun in 2003 and completed in spring of 2005. So that included a 1,400 square foot space for the archives that was planned in the initial construction. We're on the ground floor, so we can have this wonderful compact shelving. We can crank the shelves back and forth. Has workspace for archivists and researchers. So here we are. And who will do the work? Well, that was me. I began 2 days a week as archivist in May of 2003. So to start a program, to start archives, you need some support from your administration. You need somebody to do it. You need a policy to figure out. You have to decide what you're going to keep and what you're not going to keep. Some ongoing budget for staff and materials, and support and interest from your institutional staff. So what we're there for is to collect and retain and maintain and make available the materials that others use to reconstruct and so on. We learn from it, so we're better informed and we know how to make decisions in the future. What kind of records? This is records in their second life we're keeping. They've been used by somebody else, and now we're holding them for people to research. You keep material that's evidential value. That's the sort of the official things. It documents the organization and function and policies, actions, decisions, and so on. Budgets. For us, for instance, it's our cooperative agreement with NSF, this kind of official stuff. You keep things that have what we call informational value. This documents the people, the places, the things, the events. Can be, lots of this is photographs and even videos, whatever. Things that have intrinsic value, that tends to be, at least in our field, it's famous sign or unique format. For instance, I have some of Ron Bracewell's punched paper tapes from the early solar observations that they were doing, and I've saved a sample of each of the types of material he used to do solar observations. I have, with John Krause's material, I have a postcard of Big Ear that was signed by Neil Armstrong. So, and this material, this is text or photos or digital or any kind of format. Why do you save it? For accountability. It's an unquestionable body of records. Telescope logs. Who really observed this first? What was done, how it was done, why it was done. So archives are old stuff, records that may be interesting or useful in their second life, but it has to be old stuff that's organized and indexed. If it's not, you're sunk. Organizing moves papers from this. This is John Krause's home office after he died, and I have to tell you that despite the disorganization that it looks like is there, John Krause's material was very organized. To this, Ron Bracewell's stuff getting ready to be shipped to us from Stanford. To this, this is material on the shelf in archival boxes and so on at NRAO. Indexing gives you access. The one on the top is just a little portion from the finding aid for Reber's material, talking about his antenna series, and you see here the Denistone, his antenna there. The second one is the listing of interviewees, a piece of the listing of Woody Sullivan's interviews. And the bottom piece, at the American Institute of Physics Center for the History of Physics, they do a sort of a union catalog. It's called the International Catalog of Sources, and anybody that can send material to them or records to them of notices to them of what materials they have, it goes into this catalog. So you could look at this and you can see that the Grote-Reber papers are at NRAO. You can look up whoever, you can look at, and so on. If it isn't indexed and organized, well, who remembers the last scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark? This is what will happen if it isn't organized and indexed. And even if it gets into an archive and it can be there and still not be organized and indexed, and then the poor historian gets to the state where he's told that these are unprocessed papers. So here you are. Where should you donate your papers? Well, NRC has an extensive archives program. So to your university or institution, does the institution have archives? For universities, there's certainly a better chance for good processing and so on if there's a strong astronomy or at least a strong science presence at your university. The American Institute of Physics Center for the History of Physics will, they don't want to take your papers because they don't have room. But they will facilitate finding a home for papers. Is smaller better? Well, big universities have a lot more resources and staff and so on. At a smaller institution, you're more likely to find someone doing the archives who knows the material and knows the connections between them and can say, oh, well, you should look with this as well as with this. What should you save? Well, personal and professional papers would include the correspondence, including email, course notes, lab notebooks. Some of John Finley's lab notebooks, for instance, have detailed and very interesting information about building the telescopes, about going to advise in Iraq about building the radio telescope there, which was later destroyed. It was a bombing target during the Iran-Iraq War. Meeting notes and minutes, diaries and appointment calendars are really useful. all this sort of stuff, grant proposals, drafts, and so on. Photographs, please label them and date them. I've spent countless hours, I think, going around the halls asking people, do you know who's in this photograph? Who's the third person from the left here? Do you know when this was taken? Do you know where this was taken? Do you know what this is? Non-scientific material, correspondence with family and friends. Ron Bracewell's letters back to his family when he was in Cambridge working on his PhD. Fascinating stuff. And again, please label the photos. Institutional records, if you're involved with saving records for your institution, again, these are the types of things you should save. More ephemeral things, instrument catalogs, unpublished conference proceedings and reports. These are very useful. But unless they've been annotated, journal articles, preprints, reprints, generally we end up discarding them. Give your books to a library. Well, then there's this problem. A lot now of the important sources of information have replaced paper. Used to be that every letter you wrote, there was a carbon copy, it went in the files, and okay, not anymore. You send it by email. There's all kinds of challenges for long-term preservation. The software changes, the hardware changes, and so on. But many archives can accept and save things while they're waiting for a more long-term solution. But even if the data medium lasts a long time, will the technology exist to read it? CDs, DVDs, they're not a permanent archival medium. They're easily corrupted. Many new computers don't even have optical drives. You can't just digitize everything and get rid of the paper. It's far more likely that a black and white negative will be viewable 100 or 1,000 years from now than the digitized version, so we keep both. But for now, there's a huge percentage of stuff that's perhaps entering into what Woody refers to as the digital dark ages. The Sumerian clay tablets, and maybe that was the high point of technology for reading and writing. There was a fire, it was fine. Clay tablets just came through that just fine. And so on that cheerful note, I think Woody is next, who's going to talk
Sure.
about.
All right, thanks, Tom.
So,